So, today we're talking about beauty and goodness / ugliness and evil in the world, and how we reconcile the two of them together. Do you want to have a gander at the thoughts you've been having?
I was thinking like there's like so much darkness and things happening in the world, and there's also so much beauty and light at the same time. And how do we reconcile that in our worldview, and why is it important to do that, and I guess how it impacts the way we live based on how we see the world as either good and beautiful, or ugly and evil.
Like, how do you distinguish between the two?
I guess. Like, how do you exist in it?
Well, that's kind of hard to answer because there's so many aspects to this. Because, I did talk about, I did think about, like seeing the world as an optimist versus seeing it as a pessimist versus like something else, which I thought about as well. So I would say like a pessimist is someone who looks at the evil in the world and then determines that evil is greater than the good in the world, and the world is evil. An optimist is someone who looks at the world and sees the good in it, and then says that outweighs the bad in the world, right? But then I talked about, I had something like just a note in my archives, and I said like, the world was made good, do we treat it that way? And I would say this perspective is more like seeing the world as something that was good, but is now corrupt. So if you think about like light versus darkness, we know that darkness isn't actually a thing in and of itself. We know that darkness is the absence of light. So when we say the world was made good, do we see it that way? It's more of saying there is darkness in the world, but we see it as the absence of the goodness that it once was. So I use an example of like my water bottle. So this water bottle has like a scratch on it, like over here, because I dropped it. Instead of seeing this thing and saying like, oh, this thing is bad because it has a scratch, or the other option, which is like, oh, I still have the whole bottle, this thing is good, like glass half full versus glass half empty. This perspective is more like, this bottle has a scratch on it, and it was good without the scratch, but now it's not so good anymore, so let me like polish it up. Now it's good again. Right, so it's more of an outlook of restoration rather than distinguishing the evil and the bad. It's more, I mean, there is distinguishing, but it's less of a perspective change, in the sense that you're just having a perspective about what's there, but it's more of a active, participatory sort of outlook on life. So
that you're neither just like pessimist or like dismissing it and just being like passive about doing something, nor are you just like banging on, seeing it as
nor are you just being like a passive optimist, which I'm not saying there's anything objectively wrong being a pessimist or an optimist, because it really just comes down to your personality, your disposition, and also your past experiences with certain things, right? But really I'm just sort of using that as an offshoot for maybe something like this, which is like combining the two maybe. Which is like, for example, if we look at our relationships, say like our family or our friends, we can either look at that, we can either think about them like, oh, I see all the bad, so they're bad. The bad outweighs the good. Or you see all the good and the good outweighs the bad. But you see both the good and the bad, and you say, the bad is there because it was once good.
And it could be
not
good.
Not because, but it's like the bad is there, but it was once good. And I can do something. I can make something better. I can make something out of this. Rather than just dismissing it entirely, or to just exist with it passively, but to see what you can do about what's already there. So like you said, like restoring something rather than recreating or trying to rediscover something.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of us have an ideal of what's good, even if we don't necessarily have the thing that is good we still have like an inclination, like an ideal of what is good. And I think that's a really beautiful mark of our creators' imprint on us, because we do gravitate towards what is beautiful and what is light and what is giving us life.
And we can see where the light is missing. Like we know where the light is missing.
Exactly.
But there's a few choices you can make with that kind of knowledge.
Yeah.
And I went into that because in Genesis, when it describes the way God created the world, after God created all the things through all the days, he said, and it was good.
Yeah.
Right? And that's something really interesting, because I would say, as someone who used to be like a hardcore pessimist, I didn't see the good in the world. I didn't see the beauty in all the plants. I only saw the corruption, right? Because the Bible talks about the corruption as well. The Bible talks about how creation is fallen. So I used to just look out into the world and be like, everything is fallen. Like everything is so bad. Everything is always dying. But then you miss the point. You miss the point that at some point in the past, it was good. It was perfect even. And I think to have that, to change that outlook from just a flat out pessimist to also at some point also just being an optimist. Okay, sorry guys, technical difficulties. Okay, so I was on like pessimism, right? Okay, so to change that outlook from someone who's just an outright pessimist into someone who sees that, to acknowledges the negative, but to see that it was once positive, was something that really helped me. So, yeah. But I just think it's a middle ground. I don't know what it is, but it's that kind of outlook gives you excitement and gives you that gives you an action. Like it's an action oriented mindset. It's not just a I'm seeing things mindset. Because now you start seeing, there's a certain, like if I take you through the emotional journey, like first you go like you feel sad or like you feel despair because something is terrible.
Yeah.
But then you journey into hope. And you see something that's good. But then
it could be good.
But then you go back into anger because you see that it was good. And then that anger motivates you to do something about it.
Yeah.
Right. So it's sort of like it's not really like the stages of grief where things get progressively better. It's more of like a on and off. It's not on and off, but it's like you start with the negative, you move into the positive, but then you see that because you see the positive, now you hate the negative.
Yeah.
And you recognize you want to uplift the positive, and you want to make that something that's
really
dominant.
Good point. So you see it in context. You neither see it as one is better than the other. You see it as something that is like true because the other is equally real.
You acknowledge both the good and the bad.
Yeah, and that's the only way that you can actually move past something.
But it's not just like an empty, completely logical outlook on good and bad. It's more of there's a hope in that as well, because there's we recognize the creator, we recognize the fact that he made everything good. And we recognize that he's put us here on earth to do something. And we look at the things around us that aren't so good, and we take a good look at it and ourselves, at our abilities and our calling, and we see which active steps we can take that's within our sphere of influence, so we can actually make this thing, restore this thing, like polish up, buff up the scratch, restore this thing to what it was, to the best of our ability. Yeah, rather than also recreating, like storing out the bottle and getting a new one. That's a different approach. Or say like the Bolshevik Revolution, like just wiping out the entire monarchy, ending the royal line, and just re-establishing your own government. That is 100% not what this outlook promotes. And I feel this is really relevant because we're entering a period of time where communism, like outright communism, is something that's accepted. Like there are university students, like thousands of university students, who actually believe in socialist and communist ideals, and who call themselves feminists, and who believe in all these left-leaning things. And I'm not that politically inclined, but this is one of those things where it's something I'm very passionate about. First, because of my my upbringing as a Taiwanese, but also just we know for a fact that communism is one of the dominant ideologies of the past 100 years that has claimed the vast amount of lives it has. The vast number. Like if we think about, the culture loves to talk about funny windmill symbol and funny mustache man to avoid demonetization. The angry German man who was supposed to be an artist, We love to linger about that, but we don't talk about, or we forget about Mao Zedong or Pol Pot, who claimed like tens of millions of lives, right? And I would say their ideology comes from a pessimism first, but there's also an optimism, right? This is the dichotomy. First, they're pessimistic about the world they live in. Then they're optimistic about the ideology they believe in, and like an overemphasis on both things. And so this huge contrast creates this tension where they feel like a revolution has to happen for the two to be reconciled.
Yes.
Right. And that's really dangerous because we stop seeing things from an objective standpoint. Now we see things from perception rather than reality. Whereas I would argue, if I take this bottle and I see it objectively, I see it as something with a scratch that was made something that was without a scratch, which it is. The rational thing to do, or like the restorative thing to do, would be to buff up the scratch and to keep the bottle.
Instead of just throwing it away?
Instead of just throwing it away, or just seeing that this one scratch ruins this whole thing. Even though, like, if you do that, you would cease to recognize that this thing was once good, which is something that I want to stress. And that goes with like, okay, if we want to move slightly away from the political sphere, and we just, well, it is still politicized, but so if we want to look at marriage, there are guys today, and also feminists today, who believe that marriage is a scam, who believe that marriage is something you should never get into because it's just a terrible, I don't actually know the full extent of the argument, but the arguments for them is more like it's going to ruin your life, or it's going to make you financially worse, it's going to make you emotionally worse, that your partner's just going to leave you eventually because humans aren't wired that way for monogamy or whatever. Rather than looking at marriage as something that was made good once, but is now corrupt. And to think of it that way, would instead of spurring us to get rid of it, or spurring us to just enter into it recklessly and believing that everything was once as it was, we go into it with a restorative vision. We go into it knowing the hard things that marriage entails, knowing the difficulties that it would carry, and knowing the challenges and also the real risks that happen in today's society with the easiness of divorce, like with basically no social consequences, no legal consequences. If we recognize those things, we can go into marriage objectively, and we can take something with scratches on it, buff up the scratches, and keep the thing that it was good, that was made good. So anyway, do you have any doubt?
I really like the points you made, and about how, I guess I want to talk about beauty standards in this world.
It's gonna be a long video.
So like beauty has been really like publicized in a lot of ways, and it's something that every human would feel some sort of connection with. We all love things that are pleasing to the eye, and we all gravitate towards it, but it's something that's also been corrupted, and in a sense that the concept of it and how it's been used to for selfish gains and stuff, in like the commercials and industries and all these things as well, like, but that's to another degree. Yeah.
Did you talk about selfishness? Sorry, I kind of zoned out.
Selfishness.
We did too many takes, guys. This is like take number 50. I'm just exaggerating. It's too much technical difficulties, everything.
It keeps on
wrong.
like stopping.
Anyway, so can you like sum up the last? I heard the first part, but the second half.
The second half, okay. How it's like used now in the in industry and commercials and all these things.
A little bit before that.
How it's been corrupted.
Yes. In the earlier take, we talked about how beauty is a indicator of something good, like a good quality. That say, if someone is beautiful, we know this. Like, there's indications there that signify that someone is healthy, someone is well put together, someone who's gonna have good children, right? But then we also talked about how that's not the sole reason for what it was made for, and we can see that in Genesis, God created the things in the Garden of Eden. He said, I'm up with the verse on the screen, but it's like, he made the fruits in the garden and all these plants, and he said specifically that those things were pleasing to the eye. Those things were beautiful, and that was like an end in and of itself. It wasn't just like a side thing. It's like, oh, it was nice looking, you know, just because it was.
I might as well add some sparkles and sprinkles.
Yeah, it's like it was
so
intentional.
Nice.
It was intentional.
Yeah. It's like inherently part of the thing, the essence of the things, which is the purpose of it.
Yeah, and that also ties into like the whole premise we started with, which was like the world was made good, right? We can also say the world was made beautiful, and has now become more and more ugly. And that also goes into the restorative mindset we can have, instead of like a revolutionary mindset that I think a lot of young people are influenced by. Yeah. But we also talked about how we should see beauty holistically, less so than it being just something good to look at, but to see that yes, it was for a reason. It has a reason in and of itself to be beautiful, but to not linger solely on that beauty, but to see what brings about that beauty. Because beauty is part of a bigger picture. Like, the fruit that was made in the Garden of Eden was both pleasing to the eye, but good for food.
Yeah.
It was both together. It wasn't just. It was beautiful, and that's it. It wasn't just. It was good for food, and that's it. And obviously, there's like, it's okay for you to have things that are just nice. Like potatoes aren't beautiful, but they taste good. Like I like potatoes.
Yeah, but they don't look bad either.
I wouldn't call it beautiful. But yes, you're right. Yeah.
Maybe the original potatoes are beautiful.
You never know. You never know. Maybe potato flour is like are actually really nice, but we never eat them, so we never find out. But we want to see it as a holistic picture. I think in interpersonal relationships, I'm mostly applying this to like us as humans, right? Because we're made to be both someone who's capable of adding value and benefit to everyone else, but also someone who's beautiful in as much as the capacity we can have, we can be. And also talked about how beauty is a byproduct of being healthy, having healthy diet choices, healthy lifestyle, healthy life in general, like your
Healthy,
spiritual, emotional life, and everything.
And just like, if you look at an apple, you wouldn't want to eat an apple that looks rotten.
Yeah.
And so just what is inside would carry over to the outside. And if you focus on the holistic nature of beauty as a whole, in the sense that it's serving
Serving a higher purpose.
Serving a higher purpose, it becomes something that is truly beautiful.
Yeah.
Instead of just something vain.
To transcend that idea of just things just being surface, or things just being made for function, like IKEA furniture, or like something worse than IKEA furniture, like really, really poorly designed stuff that people find in hotels, like really, really low level, like 2-3 star hotels. That's just like really crappy, but it works, right? It works, so it's fine. But to balance both things and to see that the ultimate ideal is to have both reconciled to each other, both in perfect harmony, and both serving the glory of God, which is ultimately what everything was made for. To not diminish either one, to not say that function is greater than beauty when it comes to making drawers or when it comes to people, but to see that beauty isn't in itself, but to also see the other end, which is the substance is important, and that both are not serving each other, both are serving God together.
Yes.
Rather than it being two separate, distinct things.
Yeah. It's not like a 50-50, it's like 100-100 in and of itself, together as a cohesive thing. Yeah.
Feel free to add anything.
I think that's been a really good discussion.
Thanks for adding that.
Thank you for being here.
I agree. We're both tired. We've been doing this for like an hour and a half.
Yeah. I don't know what it is about today, but like, first the storage ran out, so I had to do a second take, and then we were like trying to.
No, first we didn't like the first take. Oh, it was like 2 to 3 takes actually. Combined together.
3 takes. Yeah. And the second, it's like the storage is full, and then we deleted
the storage was
videos.
full again.
Yeah.
After that.
Yeah.
And then now we're on another camera.
Yeah.
So hope you guys enjoyed this one. We definitely had fun making it, even though we're tired.
Yeah.
But
Definitely.
Hopefully that was valuable. Vanessa and I will see you next time.
Yeah. Thank you.
No.